Our next presenter is Tony Pippa.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me here today. I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm going to leave shortly after my presentation, in fact, to go work with some state colleagues on implementation of the SDGs. But I'm glad to be able to spend some time here this morning and to offer my reflections, and thanks to Jim for kicking us off. I acted as basically the U.S. Special Envoy to the United Nations last year, and so I led the U.S. in negotiations as we were in the intergovernmental process to come to a final agreement. But this has been also a long process. This is multi-year. In fact, the Secretary General called the development of the SDGs one of the most inclusive and transparent processes in UN history. It's been a 3-year process almost. Started with a high-level panel that Molly was very involved in, actually, that the Secretary General seated. And so I make that point because this has been a very bottom-up effort, and I think it provides a sense of ownership and political commitment among the countries, all the member states of the UN, actually, that have signed up to this agenda. And I want to start my remarks just by thinking about what that political commitment provides and what it means. It is the first time, as he noted, that issues like prevention from violence, physical security for citizens, rule of law, governance, are now universally acknowledged as elemental to human, social, and sustainable development. And I think we can't underestimate the power of that. This is not an agenda that's being forced on anyone. This is an agenda that the General Assembly collectively agreed to and developed together. And also with the help and assistance of outside experts, which were part of the process and in an unusual way, with civil society, with private sector organizations as well. And so I think all of that provides an opportunity. And certainly, the U.S. is very excited to have issues like prevention from violence part of the Sustainable Development Goals and part of the 2030 Agenda, primarily because we think the evidence supports it. We think the evidence was very strong about how elemental things like that are toward achieving sort of our aspirations and where we want to go on issues of social and economic and environmental progress. So we advocated strongly for elements that are in Goal 16, that are in the gender goal, that are directly related to prevention from violence. But I have to note also that these elements actually eventually stayed on the agenda, not necessarily just because of our advocacy. And in fact, it is really because developing countries themselves were very strong advocates for these elements being part of the agenda. You had countries like Liberia and Timor-Leste coming out of conflict who advocated strongly for saying that this must remain and this must be an elemental part of the agenda. And in fact, truth be told, nothing much gets done in the UN unless you have the support of a wide range of countries, developing countries included. And so I think that as we pursue achievement of the goals, we need to keep that in mind, that commitment is broad-based. That political commitment does provide the basis for better and more data on the connection between violence and its effects on development. And when you think to the MDGs, it's sort of something that we don't remember much now, but at the advent of the MDGs, there weren't always universally accepted indicators and measurement, even on very specific areas of global health. And the MDGs helped provide that. I think we see the SDGs as a real opportunity to continue to drive that sort of measurement and data around new parts of the agenda, like prevention from violence. There's a real opportunity here. We talk about the data revolution, and it's something that now has been a large theme throughout the development of the SDGs. And this is a significant opportunity, I think, for this community and for other communities around issues that are in Goal 16. This political to the commitment to the SDGs is also universal. This is no longer an agenda like the MDGs were that were focused primarily on developing countries. The SDGs are a holistic framework for development for any country, the United States included. So it applies to any country, and the commitment by countries is that it applies to their own context, no matter their own level of development. And the president was unequivocal when he was at the Sustainable Development Summit, that this is a commitment that the United States is taking on behalf of itself, for its own citizens domestically, as well as for the support that we provide internationally through agencies like USAID, where I am right now. And I think that provides us, as Jim mentioned, a real platform, for sort of sharing lessons, sharing models, sharing interventions, sharing data across many different divides, which traditionally up to now have been. It also breaks down what has been in the past sort of an aid agenda. This is no longer just about resources going from developed to developing countries, and frankly, it's no longer just about the resources of governments themselves. In the run-up to the SDGs, we also had a third Financing for Development conference in Addis the prior July, before September. It focused in a holistic way on the resources and financing that's going to be necessary to achieve the ambitions of the SDGs. Because the SDGs are holistic and because they are ambitious, they're going to require resources that go beyond just what governments can provide, and Addis focused on domestic resources of governments and developing and increasing them and targeting them more specifically and more effectively. But it also focused on private sector resources and bringing those partners to the table. It focused on philanthropy, civil society, what the interaction is. From our perspective at USAID, we're looking at how we use our foreign assistance, for example, to leverage and bring other resources to the table and to be a catalyst for those resources, and to use our comparative advantage and to unlock and unleash private sector resources at the scale that would be necessary to really achieve the SDGs. So I think that political commitment really provides an opportunity for elevating partnerships that already exist, also looking at where there are gaps and where there might be opportunities for new partnerships and platforms. Again, when you think back to global health and you think of the Global Fund for AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, that's an outcome actually of the MDGs and sort of the MDGs trying to get everyone on the same page. That sort of opportunity now exists for many different issues across the way, and I would challenge you and encourage you to think about that opportunity and how it can be applied to the issues that you're working on. I think finally the SDGs are groundbreaking in their integration, and it really is highlighting the linkages between different drivers of development. The challenge is that we make progress on the multiple areas of development together and at once, and we look for that integration as we think of our interventions. That will be a challenge, but certainly I think it challenges countries at the very least, at minimum, not to backslide in certain areas as they're trying to make progress in a particular area. So as we know, a commitment to mitigate ongoing and prevent future violence is really embedded in and implicit throughout the 2030 Agenda. And that is really core to one of the basic themes and principles of the SDGs, which is leave no one behind. The SDGs should be looking to reach the hardest to reach first, and ensure that they are part of the progress that the SDGs stimulate. And issues related more explicitly to violence appear in a number of targets. As has already been pointed out, there's some that are very prominent in Goal 16, targets 16.1 and 16.2. For USAID, our work to promote peace and reduce fragility and conflict focuses on 4 interrelated priorities around that, all of which are firmly rooted in the SDGs. The first is enhancing stability, and that's by addressing the sources of stress and conflict in political, economic, and social spheres. Second is improving security by providing an environment which enhances personal security or personal safety, and also establishes the conditions under which serious outbreaks of generalized violence are averted. We also look to encourage reform that are related to the conditions that will increase the likelihood of long-term stability, so countries or communities don't find themselves in conflict or susceptible to violence, and developing the capacity, Jim mentioned, of institutions that would help with both lasting recovery and transformational development. And as we noted, violence reduction also figures prominently in Goal 5, in the gender goal, particular Target 5.2, which commits us to ending gender-based violence. This is something which has been an issue to which USAID and indeed the broader U.S. government is deeply committed. We have the executive order that President Obama signed for preventing and responding to violence against women and girls globally, a U.S. National Action Plan for Women, Peace, and Security, to USAID's own policy on gender equality and female empowerment, under which reducing gender-based violence is one of its main objectives. And in fact, USAID and the State Department are significantly engaged in the call to action to end violence against women and girls, which was launched by the UK and Sweden in 2013. And we've assumed leadership in September of 2014. And under that leadership, the call to action developed a roadmap for action to operationalize a framework for transitioning the commitments made by the participants into a substantive and meaningful change. As Jim pointed out as well, there's the cross-cutting nature of violence and how it affects other development outcomes. And so from our perspective, reducing violence entails work that goes beyond just programs aimed narrowly on preventing violence. It's integrated into other parts of Goal 16 and with the agenda as a whole. And in fact, as we've been thinking about our support for two countries to achieve the SDGs, that's been one of our key principles, that the SDGs are really a framework, and so how do we work with countries on the integration of different issues throughout the framework, given that multiple outcomes are interconnected and that really progress on the ambitious goals are going to require an interlinked approach. So just a few examples of that. One is a related program that contributes to violence reduction is our Access to Justice program in Ethiopia, which focuses on vulnerable populations. That includes low-income groups, women, victims of gender-based violence, by raising awareness of their legal rights, which actually applies to some other parts of the agenda, and provides them with the means to access expert legal advice and obtain professional representation before a court of law. Even in our humanitarian assistance, our Office of Humanitarian Assistance supports capacity building and training of Ministry of Health healthcare workers as part of our health response in natural disasters and complex emergencies. For example, through partners in the Democratic Republic of Congo, our Ministry of Health staff are taught how to clinically manage rape to assist gender-based violence survivors in a safe and secure manner, and refer them to available psychosocial support for further assistance in areas where there is disaster and complex emergencies happening. And in fact, in Burma, our Office of Transition Initiatives partnered with local media professionals to build the capacity of local journalists in the lead up to the election that just happened in 2015. And they were trained on how to mitigate the risk of electoral violence through responsible election coverage. And so you can just see from these examples sort of the ways in which we're trying to think about this in a holistic way. And I really do believe that the universal nature of the SDGs really helps us think about how do our domestic endeavors and our domestic efforts apply globally and vice versa. I was just struck by the data that you put up on homicide rates in the Americas. And the Americas includes the United States. And so what are we doing in terms of that in our efforts, and then what can we learn and actually apply globally to the models that we're both trying to stimulate globally. I think the SDGs provides the U.S. government as a whole with a really unique opportunity to sometimes break down the silos, especially between the foreign policy side and the domestic side, and have robust conversations and sharing back and forth to look at models and interventions that are working and how we integrate those into our processes. So I'm excited about that. I think we're just at the beginning of that. And I think as the agenda evolves and as we start to pursue what we're doing to help implement this agenda both in the U.S. and globally through our efforts, we'll see that more and more as agencies come together and think about how the SDGs apply to their own work and how the SDGs also apply to the work in the U.S. government as a whole. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, and thanks very much for having me, and look forward to some of the outcomes from your discussion throughout the day as well. Thank you.